What? What's going on? No matter how many times I try, my apartment key won't work. I've just returned from a business trip and find myself completely locked out. I try to reach Randy, who should be home, but there's no response. Peeking through the keyhole, I see that the apartment is empty. I'm sure I'm at the right place, so what's going on? Where's my stuff? Where did Randy disappear to? Panicked, I rush to my in-laws' house, and there is Randy. As soon as I arrive, Randy looks at me and says, "Who are you?" Speechless, I watch as Randy smirks triumphantly. I could never have imagined the ending that awaited me. My name is Sharon, and I am 32 years old. I am a working housewife living with Randy. We've been married for 3 years. Randy was originally a colleague at work, and we were fierce competitors. He was a good rival, but also my biggest supporter. It didn't take long for us to start dating, and we got engaged after a year. But there was one thing that worried me about getting married. It was something Randy said as we were about to register our marriage. "Sharon, I'm thinking of quitting my job after we get married." "What? Quitting your job? Why would you do that?" I asked, stunned. "Actually, I've been thinking about this for a while. I want to use my experience to start my own company." "Your own company?" "Yeah, I want to start a business and do something bigger. So please let me give it my best shot." He bowed his head, and I could see the sincerity in his eyes. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to support Randy as his biggest advocate, but quitting his job to start a business was a huge risk. We were married now, and I hoped to have kids someday. Was it really necessary to sacrifice our stable life for this dream? I couldn't voice my concerns to Randy. In the end, he quit his job as soon as we got married and used all our savings to start a staffing agency. People often said, "Wow, Randy is amazing. Aren't you proud your husband is a CEO?" But I didn't feel that way at all. My female colleagues, especially my good friend Marilyn, seemed to understand my unease. Starting a business right after getting married is too risky, Marilyn often said, echoing my thoughts. "I agree with you, Marilyn." I wanted to say no, but I couldn't. "Be careful, Sharon. Randy tends to push things through based on his mood." "I know. I've seen him make mistakes at work because of that." "You'll have to keep an eye on him, Sharon." "I will. I'll listen to him regularly and do what I can. But the truth is, I've only ever done my current job, so the world of entrepreneurship is completely unknown to me." "Why did Randy suddenly want to start a business, and why a staffing agency?" I asked, but Randy never gave me a clear answer. Though Randy had started his own company, it seemed he hadn't thought things through. He hired several employees right off the bat, but with little work coming in, the labor costs were skyrocketing. In today's world, there are countless staffing agencies online, so offering face-to-face staffing services was, to put it bluntly, reckless. Randy used to be competent at his job, but ever since he quit, his ideas seemed to be running dry. Sure enough, the company ran out of funds in no time, and employees started quitting. Finally, unable to pay salaries, Randy approached me. "Sharon, can you lend me $20,000? "What, $20,000? Do you even realize how much money that is?" "I do, but what choice do I have? I have to pay the employees." "That may be true, but that's not my problem. You are my wife, and you are saying it's not your problem. You married me, committing to a lifetime together, right?" "Right, so you should help me out when I'm in trouble." Randy spoke as if he had done nothing wrong. I couldn't find the words to respond to his cold, disdainful gaze. For the next few days, Randy kept demanding the $20,000, adding insults like, "This happened because you didn't support me as a wife. It's all your fault. You need to cover the financial shortfall." I was berated daily and even faced some physical aggression. As days went by, I started to believe that maybe it was my fault. A year into our marriage, Randy's company teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. By then, my savings had significantly dwindled, mostly drained by efforts to keep Randy's company afloat. Despite the dire situation, Randy refused to consider shutting down the business. Instead, he sought help from his parents, my father-in-law, an average office worker, and my mother-in-law, a homemaker, had little to spare, but they couldn't turn away their desperate son. Ultimately, they mortgaged their house to lend him the money. Learning of this, even I was taken aback. How far would any parent go for their child? If Randy's company failed, they'd lose their home. Unfortunately, my fears materialized when Randy's company collapsed within just 6 months, leaving us drowning in debt. Following the fallout, Randy seemed to lose all drive to work. He spent his days idling around the house. Unable to tolerate it any longer, I confronted him multiple times. Randy, look, we're not exactly swimming in cash either. I've exhausted my savings. Can you please start looking for a job? What? How can you be so heartless? I'm devastated after losing my company. This is not the time for that. We owe money to your parents. They'll be fine. Their house is collateral. Do you even understand what that means? If things continue like this, they'll lose their house. It doesn't matter to us. My parents are old. They might as well be useful for once. I can't believe this. I never thought you'd be this kind of person. From that point on, cracks began to appear in our marriage. It's been about 6 months since Randy's company went bankrupt, and he shows no signs of finding a job. He's doing day labor once a week and spending all the money on himself. I've been dipping into my savings and cutting corners to make ends meet. Then one day, during a break at work, my mother-in-law called. "Ah, Sharon, sorry for the sudden call, but I need to talk to you." "Hello, mother-in-law. What's going on?" "Could you lend us some money? If we can't pay back the loan by the end of the month, we lose our house." It seemed my worst fears were coming true. I told my mother-in-law, "Let me think about it. I've already talked to Randy, but he said, I don't have any money. If you lose the house, so be it." "What? Randy said that? What should we do, Sharon? We're going to lose our home." "Calm down, I have an idea." After hanging up, I called my father, who answered immediately. "Hey Dad, it's Sharon. A long time, not talk. How are you?" "I'm fine, but there's a problem." "What happened?" "Randy's company went bankrupt, and now his parents might lose their house." "What? Why?" After explaining the situation, my father agreed to help financially, even though Randy was clearly at fault. My dad said, "He is the man you chose," and didn't blame me. My father is a wealthy real estate investor, and I've never had to worry about money. The rental income alone is a considerable amount, so to be honest, I never had any problems making ends meet until I got married. But when I got a job, I decided to be financially independent and refuse any support from him. And Randy ruined all of that. I felt guilty, but I had no choice but to accept my father's help to save my in-laws. I kept it a secret from Randy and transferred the money to my in-laws. Why didn't I tell Randy? I've only told him that my dad is a real estate agent. If he found out about my father's wealth, I feared he'd change his attitude and start demanding money. If that happened, it would be the end of us. If we are going to continue living together, I don't want to grow to resent Randy. That's why I have to keep my father's wealth a secret from him. To avoid hurting my beloved parents and in-laws, I chose to continue my relationship with Randy. When I told my mother-in-law about my father's financial help, she said, "Are you sure? You and your father saved us." "It's fine. I'd rather avoid any unnecessary drama." "All right, if you say so, we'll pay back the money, even if it takes time." "Don't worry, I'll help with that too." "Thank you, Sharon. You've been a lifesaver." I could hear the tremor in my mother-in-law's voice over the phone. I was glad that I could help her. Knowing that she had been pushed into such a corner, I felt a sense of relief in being able to assist. But Randy's behavior was deteriorating. He was increasingly absent from home, and when I asked where he was, he retorted with, "None of your business," yet he still demanded money for groceries. Then, I had to embark on a business trip for 3 days. I was worried but also relieved. 3 days without seeing Randy's face. I had married him out of love, but now his presence was a burden. 3 days later, I returned from my trip. From the airport, I headed home with a gloomy feeling. I should have been eager to get home, but the thought of seeing Randy again filled me with dread. When I tried to unlock the door, something felt off. What's going on? No matter how many times I tried, the key wouldn't work. Randy wasn't responding to my calls. It seemed like I was locked out. What should I do if Randy is not home? I can't get in. And it wasn't just that. Peering through the peephole, I saw that the apartment was empty. The house shouldn't be wrong, but why? Where's my stuff? Where did Randy go? Panicked, I forgot to call the management company and called my parents instead, but they didn't answer. So, I decided to go to my in-laws' house where I could also give them the souvenir I'd bought. When I arrived, Randy was there. "Randy, what are you doing here?" My mother-in-law spoke first. He showed up out of the blue, asking to stay for a few days. "What, Randy? What's going on?" I couldn't get into our apartment. Randy chuckled and looked down at me. "Who are you?" I was at a loss for words, but Randy wore a smug grin on his face. Still, I mustered the courage to speak. "What are you talking about, Randy? What about the house keys?" "Isn't it obvious? I've already moved out of that house." What? Oh, and by the way, we're already divorced, so we are nothing to each other now. I got a new girlfriend, so you should just go. A new girlfriend? Caught off guard, my mind went blank as Randy shoved his phone screen in my face. There he was, hugging the young woman, both of them smiling happily. In that moment, everything felt meaningless, and I lost the will to think. Fine, whatever. This marriage was over a long time ago. I slumped to the floor, and Randy looked down at me, grinning. Then, with a loud smack, Randy fell to the ground. His mother-in-law had slapped him. What? Mother, what are you doing? What have you done, young man? What do you mean, what have I done? I just left a useless wife, and I'm planning to marry my new girlfriend. His mother-in-law started to tremble, her face turning red. Randy, do you really not know that you have this life because of Sharon? When your business was failing and this house was about to be foreclosed, Sharon asked her father for a loan. My father-in-law did what Randy was visibly shocked, probably never expecting this. His mother-in-law didn't hold back. And yet you, how much trouble do you need to cause others to be satisfied, Randy? Even your mistress grew tired of you and disappeared. Serves you right, this is the fate of a man who lived only for himself. After the divorce, I moved back in with my parents. They're worried about me, fresh out of a failed marriage, but truth be told, I have no regrets. I have a job and a loving family who stand by my side. That alone makes me feel truly blessed. From now on, I want to live my life to the fullest for the people who truly care about me.
Charles, are you done moving yet? My father-in-law grumbles, not bothering to look at me but clearly directing his question at me. He always talks like he's the only one that matters. I've put up with it until now, but I can't anymore. I stop wiping the table and give Charles a hard stare, even though he's not looking at me. I'll be out today, I reply. Charles smirks, satisfied. You've just been a leech in garbage. I'll feel so much better when you're gone. He probably thinks, oblivious to how much his lifestyle has changed. My name's Grace. I turned 40 this year. I'm married to William and currently staying with my in-laws. It's been a few years since we got married, but we don't have kids. We don't plan on having any, and we can anyway. I found out shortly after we got married. I met William at a party, and honestly, if I'd known about his infertility from the beginning, I might not have married him. He told me on our wedding day. It felt like my world crashed down on me. We had dreams of a bright future together, imagining ourselves with perhaps 2 kids and discussing potential names for them. William even joined in on picking out names for our future children. But it was all a deception, or maybe not entirely a deception. Maybe William did desire children and thought about names, despite knowing he couldn't have them. Wasn't that the ultimate betrayal? I married him with the belief that we would create a happy family together, only to be completely deceived by William, whom I trusted implicitly. While some might have immediately filed for divorce upon discovering such a truth, divorce isn't a straightforward option for me. I had already committed to building a family with my in-laws, who are the only ones we can truly call parents. I couldn't just announce to them the day after becoming a family that we were getting divorced. Living with the in-laws meant facing the inevitable question of when we would start a family. So we decided to break the news to them right away. Naturally, we didn't blame William. Instead, we attributed our childlessness to a medical issue on my end. When they found out we couldn't have children, my in-laws were livid. A worthless woman who can't bear children should leave this house immediately, declared my father-in-law Charles, who then began treating me like a servant. From the moment I arrived, I was never treated with respect, always made to feel inferior. I ate alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after the in-laws and William finished their meals. Despite my efforts in the kitchen, I only received scraps. My weight plummeted, and within 6 months of marriage, my wrists were protruding. Previously, it was my mother-in-law Madison who bore the brunt of Charles' anger. But once I joined the family, his focus shifted to me. William noticed Madison's newfound relief. "Mom seems happier lately," he remarked, attributing it to her no longer being the target. Although she never smiled around Charles, I noticed her smiling more when talking to William. Charles's tyranny extended beyond verbal abuse. Once he learned we couldn't have children, he ordered me to work tirelessly from dawn to dusk. Since you're not fulfilling your role as a woman, at least be useful around the house, he demanded. I had always intended to work after marriage and was eager to leave the house as soon as possible. Balancing chores, work, and arriving home before everyone else was challenging, but having a job with flexible hours helped. However, even when I returned early and completed chores, I never ate with the family or received praise for my cooking. Charles, in particular, often discarded my food without tasting it, deeming it unworthy. Neither William nor Madison ever objected or offered any support. Despite my protests from the kitchen, meal times were usually silent affairs. I couldn't help but wonder if they truly enjoyed eating in such silence. But I can only observe them silently. I had no other option but to get along with my in-laws. I pretended to be friendly and played the role of a devoted wife. I couldn't pinpoint the purpose of it all, but as someone without parents, divorce seemed like an unbearable burden. Then Charles demanded that I hand over all my earnings for the household expenses. I had intended to contribute a portion of my salary, but Charles insisted on all of it, which seemed like an unreasonable demand. What's the point of working if I have no control over my own money? But speaking up was not allowed. Charles's decisions were final, and challenging him wouldn't change anything. It was easier to comply, keeping Charles in a good mood and avoiding the sorrowful looks from Madison and William. Ultimately, the main source of trouble in this marriage was Charles. Madison and William were not as much of a problem. It was Charles who oppressed and tormented me. It appeared that Madison used to handle the household finances, but it became my responsibility after marriage. Charles, isn't this too much for Grace? Madison dared to question. Shut up! Charles dismissed me in his eyes. Madison and I were treated similarly. As women, our opinions were deemed worthless and not welcomed. I took over the household budget from Madison. When I first saw it, I was shocked, but after several years, I grew accustomed to it. Perhaps because there was another source of income. Charles started spending more extravagantly than before. It's for work, he claimed, increasing his nights out. And the three of them, excluding me, began taking trips during long weekends. They never used to act like this, but suddenly everything changed. He still doesn't see me as part of the family, often referring to me as a burden or worthless. To him, I'm just a maid who doesn't cost anything. In my 20s and 30s, I could brush it off, sometimes even finding peace when Charles wasn't around. But as I neared 40, I couldn't stand his mistreatment any longer. It felt foolish and exhausting to listen to him and obey silently. I grew tired of being afraid of Charles and started standing up for myself. He didn't take kindly to that and gradually grew to resent me. This negative cycle continued to worsen, and recently, my relationship with Charles had deteriorated to the point where we hardly spoke. When he did speak, it was only to insult me. I would fire back, making the atmosphere at home unbearable. It had gotten so bad that he would demand I leave the house. But I refused to go quietly. Where do you expect me to go, knowing I have no family? I would retort every time. Charles would angrily slam his glass on the table, breaking so many that I lost count. Why should I have to deal with this? A woman like you shouldn't talk back. Madison and William would quickly exit the room, sensing another argument brewing. Once it reached this point, it became Charles' one-man show. You should be grateful to even be allowed in this house. Don't get too cocky, you leech, he would rant, his face turning red with anger. We've had this conversation 100 times, I sighed, tired of being yelled at. Normally, I would cave in and apologize. I'm sorry was my usual response, but that day was different. You need to watch what you say, Charles. You're not getting any younger. It's time to calm down. I snapped back sharply, feeling just as irritable. Charles, caught off guard by my defiance, was furious. Who do you think you're talking to? I am the head of this household. A wife like you shouldn't have opinions, he barked. I knew I had crossed a line, but I couldn't stop myself. I've been your wife for years. Isn't it time I'm treated like a human being? You're retired now with less income. It seems the tables are turning. I continued, unable to contain my pent-up frustration. I confronted Charles directly, and he responded by grabbing me by the collar. "I don't need someone like you in my house. I don't want to see your face anymore. Pack your things and leave immediately." He yelled so loudly that the furniture shook. Though I should have apologized right then, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Fine, you want me to leave? That's what will make you happy, isn't it, Charles?" I challenged him, meeting his gaze defiantly. "Yes," he spat out. Unable to remain silent any longer, I declared, "Then I'll do it." He stormed off to his room with a loud noise, and I, feeling somewhat calmer, began cleaning the living room, which Charles had left in disarray. Madison came to check on me with a worried expression, but left without saying anything, returning to her own room. I realized I had no place in this house anymore. Neither William nor Madison would stand up for me. Years of enduring mistreatment had finally erupted, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. The next morning, I followed my usual routine, waking up early to start my day. Charles emerged from his room and entered the living room, settling onto the sofa with a newspaper, paying me no mind. Without even glancing up, he casually asked, "Have you finished moving yet?" It was impossible for me to have relocated so swiftly after the events of yesterday. I assumed it was merely a drunken outburst, not a serious demand. Surely he was referring to leaving the house, right? "When do you plan on departing? You no longer have the right to reside here," Charles continued, still not meeting my gaze. Halting my task, I turned to face him directly. If he truly intends for me to leave, then I must respond seriously. "I'll be gone by today," I declared firmly. Nearby, Madison, frozen with concern, cast a worried glance in my direction. It was evident that once I departed, Charles would refocus his animosity towards her, and she didn't want me to leave. However, Charles had made up his mind. Apologizing and staying was never an option. With a satisfied laugh from Charles echoing behind me, I hurriedly gathered my belongings and left the in-laws' home. Uncertain of my destination, I felt a sense of liberation. I sent a message to William, who was already away. Please proceed with the divorce proceedings. A lawyer would reach out to him. With that, I powered off my phone. In the following days, I engaged a lawyer who reached out to William and the in-laws. Charles, convinced that divorce was inevitable, pressured William to swiftly sign the papers. William hesitated, glancing back and forth between me and the divorce documents. But there was no room for second thoughts. With Charles's insistence and my determination to move forward, he reluctantly complied. "I have no money to spare for a woman like you, but dealing with lawyers is a nuisance, so I'll foot the bill," Charles grumbled, his arrogance palpable. The lawyer offered a wry smile at his demeanor. Despite his reluctance, William signed the agreement under Charles's stern gaze. In the presence of the lawyer, I added my signature, and the divorce was finalized. We settled the distribution of assets, and I received compensation for the harassment I had documented. It proved wise to invest in legal support rather than navigate the process alone. Concerned about his reputation, Charles opted to avoid complications by involving lawyers. As the manager of household finances, I was privy to Charles's financial situation, allowing me to propose a settlement within his means. With the property division and harassment compensation settled, I embarked on a comfortable life in my own apartment. While solitude was once daunting, my time living with the in-laws and going through a divorce taught me to appreciate the tranquility of my own space. I relished preparing meals for myself, reveling in the peace of not having anyone to answer to. One day, roughly 3 months post-divorce, Charles's incessant calls flood my phone. Assuming it's nothing positive, I ignore them, but his persistence forces me to accidentally answer. "What have you done to my house?" His voice reverberates loudly, even without the speaker mode. Instinctively, I pull the phone away from my ear. "I haven't done anything. I simply left the house, as you've instructed." I reply defensively. Unsatisfied with my response, Charles continues to berate me. "How can you claim you've done nothing? I'm receiving notifications about withdrawal issues since you left. Ah, so he's upset about the withdrawal problems and blames me. I don't know. I didn't take any action. I managed everything according to your directives and paid all dues. I respond, a sense of satisfaction creeping in as I understand why Charles is upset. I suppress a grin, relieved he can't see my reaction. That's absurd. Before you arrived, we managed fine with mine, Madison's, and William's incomes. How much were you earning anyway? I recall that I never disclosed my salary details to Charles. $45,000 take home. I reveal. Charles emits a noise akin to a squashed frog before falling silent. In reality, my job in sales at an investment trust firm primarily consisted of commission-based earnings, contingent on the returns I generated for investors. However, much of it vanished due to Charles' extravagant spending. Nonetheless, I had wisely invested my inheritance, generating some additional income. It wasn't a substantial amount, but it helped cover living expenses. I relied on this income to purchase necessities, although during the property distribution, only William's savings were considered. This was because only assets acquired during our marriage were subject to distribution, excluding the inheritance from my parents and its earnings. Since I utilized all earnings for household expenses throughout the marriage, I had no savings accumulated over the years. The Charles family spent money lavishly, unaware that I was compensating for it. You claim you managed before marriage, but was it on par with our current standard of living? I questioned. Charles's frustration finally boiled over. Don't jest. You should continue contributing to our household expenses. You're the one who caused this mess, so you must take responsibility, he retorted angrily. I couldn't help but chuckle at his absurd statement. I could envision Charles's face reddening as he raised his voice. What's the matter? What are you implying? You were the one who insisted I leave, remember? I simply followed your directive. Why should I, no longer a part of the family, continue providing financial support? I replied, half amused, before hearing a loud crash from the other end. Charles must have thrown another fit. The realization that I no longer had to clean up after him almost made me wish for more destruction. Moreover, we're strangers now, not family, not anything. Please refrain from assuming familial obligations. Manage your own finances. I left you with enough to sustain yourself, didn't I? With that, I bid him farewell and disconnected the call. I anticipated more calls from Charles, but none came. I thought perhaps he was feeling remorseful, but it seemed that wasn't the case. Instead, it appeared he was too ashamed to admit he couldn't meet the payments. He resorted to pressuring William and Madison to borrow money from financial institutions to cover their expenses. While payments were made, it only led to accumulating debt. Refusing to adjust their lifestyle, they continued living beyond their means. Continuing like this will only lead to more debt. You need to make changes, I warned, but they persisted, unable to meet their financial obligations and sinking further into debt each month. William reached out to me, foolishly considering reconciliation and even suggesting severing ties with his father to reunite. How could he propose such a thing now, after failing to defend me against Charles's mistreatment? Despite my decision to stand by William, knowing we couldn't have children, he never protected me. His suffocation under Charles' influence is no longer my concern. I wish they would grasp the consequences of their actions and endure the repercussions. Now, the in-laws find themselves burdened by debt yet unwilling to adjust their lifestyle. Charles, now working as a contract laborer with reduced pay, and William and Madison have taken up part-time security positions. It's not just Charles. Madison and William are also guilty of refusing to downsize their living standards. Despite being stretched to their limit, they refuse to make sacrifices. I used to be consumed with protecting William, but now I prioritize my own well-being. At 40, the prospect of having children may be challenging, but I remain open to the possibility. Before the divorce, mornings felt like a burden, but now I wake up feeling rejuvenated. I eagerly anticipate a brighter future in my newfound independence. Stop it. Quit faking illness to slow me down. You're just a housewife. My husband, Matt, brushed off my hand as I struggled, feeling unwell, and stormed out. I'd always thought marriage meant sticking together through thick and thin, but Matt left me hanging. Despair echoed in my mind as I started to black out. Someone unexpected reached out to help me in that moment. I'm Michelle, 32 years old. I tied the knot with my husband, also 32, a year ago, and we've been living a regular life since we met at work. He supported my decision to keep working after marriage. With both of us working, we split the household chores. But since my husband wasn't great at chores, I ended up asking him to handle only the easy tasks. Surprisingly, he pitched in without complaint, so I had no complaints about our marriage. Then one day, after dealing with some minor health issues, I went to the doctor and got the surprise of my life. Congratulations! You're about 7 weeks pregnant, the doctor announced. My husband and I shared our excitement. I'm going to be a dad. It's hard to wrap my head around it, but I'm sure it'll sink in gradually. We chatted, looking forward to the future. I believed a happy life awaited us, but reality turned out differently. Hey, what's for dinner? It's your turn, right? And the bathroom needs cleaning too. My husband reminded me. I'm sorry. I felt terrible today and couldn't do anything. I replied, battling severe morning sickness, constant nausea, and struggling to even stand. I spent my days in bed, unable to work. I kept missing days, but my husband didn't try to understand my suffering. He was unsympathetic. To him, it seemed like I was just slacking off both at work and at home. He began expressing his frustration more openly with heavy sighs. Hey, don't use pregnancy as an excuse to slack off. I have to work outside. You should handle the household chores, he scolded. I often wondered how he could say such hurtful things, but to my husband, who came home stressed from work, a wife unable to handle household chores must have been frustrating. I considered retreating to my parents' home until my health improved, but I worried it would drive a permanent wedge between us. Morning sickness is temporary, and it should ease up in another couple of months, so I resolved to tough it out until then. However, my husband's disdainful behavior only worsened over time. Although the morning sickness eventually faded, my health remained poor, leading to multiple hospital stays. I made the difficult choice to take a break from work. I couldn't risk jeopardizing the baby's health by overexerting myself during pregnancy. Even after discussing it thoroughly with my doctor and employer, my husband's complaints persisted. Stop depending on me for everything. If you can't work or manage chores, it's your problem, he griped. Maybe he had a point, but every decision I made was to safeguard our unborn child. Why do I deserve such treatment? Despite enduring his unfair behavior, I mustered the courage to bring up our living expenses. My sick pay isn't much. Could you chip in more from your salary? But he remained indifferent. Why should I have to cover your expenses too? Doubts about my future with this man crept in, and my anxiety grew with each passing day. I had hoped that getting pregnant would bring positive changes, but everything seemed to go wrong instead. The final blow came from my mother-in-law, Mary. Michelle, how are you feeling? She asked me one day. Mary had raised my husband single-handedly after divorcing when he was young. She's a caring and active person who has always treated me with kindness. But then she said something that struck a nerve. It's important to stay active during pregnancy. Matt must find it tough to handle chores while working, so you should do your part. Mary's words hit me like a tidal wave. I know she means well. She's been through childbirth herself and has valuable experience. But in that moment, all I could hear was, stop being lazy. Handle all the chores if you're not working. It only made things worse. You're absolutely right, I replied, pretending to agree. I had considered opening up to Mary about my husband's unfair treatment, but her lack of understanding left me feeling even more alone. If you need anything, just let me know, Mary said before ending the call, but I was left feeling unsettled and unresolved. Then came the breaking point. I woke up that morning feeling feverish, battling aches and occasional waves of nausea. Despite my condition, I pushed through and managed to prepare breakfast for my husband. But as I collapsed onto the couch, he looked at me with disdain and remarked, "You don't need to exaggerate how difficult it is." After he left for work, my health took a turn for the worse, and I realized I wouldn't be able to muster the energy to cook dinner. Should I order takeout? I pondered. No, money's tight. I reminded myself. The funds my husband provided barely covered our expenses, and I found myself dipping into savings every month. With the looming medical costs of childbirth, I worried about our financial stability. Summoning the courage, I called my husband. "I'm really not feeling well today. I'm sorry, but I can't manage dinner. Could you grab something on your way home?" His response cut deep. "What? What are you talking about? You're just a housewife." "But I really can't move. If it's shopping, you should handle it. Don't make your husband do such things," he snapped before abruptly hanging up, leaving me in tears. After a while, I heard the door slam open. My husband had returned. "Hey, Matt, what about dinner?" I asked weakly. "I'm heading out for drinks. I'll eat out." "Don't need dinner?" he dismissed. Feeling feverish and barely able to stand, I pleaded, "I'm really struggling today. I wish you could stay with me." But he brushed me off, saying, "Stop it. Don't get in my way. You're just a housewife. You're probably just faking it as usual," before storming out. Too drained to move, I collapsed at the entrance, silently begging for help in my mind, but the empty house offered no solace. Then, from a distance, I heard a familiar voice calling out to me through the haze of my consciousness, "Stay with me." Who could it be? My consciousness slipped away. When I regained awareness, Mary was by my side, her expression filled with concern as I lay in a hospital bed. "Michelle, oh, thank goodness you're awake," she said with relief. Mary had found me collapsed at home and called an ambulance. "Don't worry, the baby is fine. I'll call the doctor," she'd assured me before quickly leaving the room, wiping away her tears. The doctor informed me that I had severe anemia along with a seasonal cold, which posed risks for the baby. Despite feeling feverish, I was shocked to hear that I had a high fever upon arrival at the hospital. "But how?" Mary questioned me, explaining that she had come over to reprimand me for supposedly slacking off on household chores. After hearing constant complaints from my husband, she decided to check on me and found me collapsed at the entrance. "I'm sorry. I acted harshly without listening to your side," Mary admitted, expressing regret for her earlier judgment. However, there was another reason for her visit. "I wanted to thank you for the gift. That red cardigan suits you so well." It had been Mary's birthday last week, and since I got married, I made sure to send her gifts on both Mother's Day and her birthday. Aware of her increasing sensitivity to cold as she aged, I chose a cardigan this year, stylish yet practical, reflecting her youthful spirit. "I remembered every word you've said, and I truly appreciate the thoughtful gift," Mary acknowledged, her voice trembling with emotion. "I had begun to wonder if you were truly as lazy as my son claimed," she confessed, tears welling up as she apologized for the misunderstanding. "It's all right. I've been wanting to talk to you about my husband, but it's been difficult to find the words," I confessed through tears to Mary. Having her by my side brought some relief to my heavy heart. As we both shed tears, Mary's expression turned to one of fiery anger. "That man, my own son, is unforgivable for letting his pregnant wife suffer like this," she exclaimed, her lips trembling with fury as she tightly clutched her handkerchief. "Michelle, what do you plan to do about your relationship with him?" When I shared my honest thoughts, Mary nodded in solidarity. "I'm here for you, always by your side," she affirmed, her supportive words giving me the courage to take action. After spending a week in the hospital, I was discharged with Mary by my side. Not once did my husband reach out to me during my stay. At that point, I was beyond caring. Upon returning home, I was hit by a repulsive odor, despite having been gone for just 4 days. "What's that smell?" "It's like living with a wild animal," Mary remarked, almost eliciting a chuckle from me, though I held it back. The stench was indeed unbearable. My husband lay sprawled on the living room couch, snoring loudly with drool dribbling from his mouth. "Wake up, you foolish son!" Mary's voice echoed through the room, startling my husband awake instantly. "Huh, Mom, you?" My husband began to protest, but Mary cut him off sharply. Michelle was in the hospital. "What's with this mess? Even a zoo would be cleaner." Mary's observation hit home. In just a week, our home had descended into chaos. Empty beer bottles and food scraps cluttered the sink, damp towels and underwear were strewn about, and the floor was sticky with spilled substances. "It's worse than a zoo. What kind of life have you been living?" I muttered, earning a glare from my husband. "Don't act all righteous. This is all because of you. Even a baby wouldn't create such a mess. You can't do anything on your own, can you?" I stated calmly, recognizing the truth in my words. Reflecting on it, I realized that I had managed the cleaning and laundry quite efficiently when I was at home. It had never resembled a zoo enclosure, and I had never imagined my husband would be so inept at managing life. "Why did you leave, Michelle, and go out?" Mary's imposing presence silenced my husband completely. I couldn't help but think that men always seem to cave in when faced with their mothers, regardless of their age. It's not like that. She was just being childish, telling me not to go out drinking. "Are you suggesting that Michelle, with her high fever and pale face, was faking it? Are you out of your mind?" Even Mary, usually composed, was now scolding him loudly. My husband remained silent, his glare directed at me. I could almost hear his inner voice accusing me of tattling. Then he muttered resentfully, "Don't get ahead of yourself. I've been supporting you all this time." In the past, his words might have intimidated me, but not anymore. "Fine then, I don't need your support anymore. I'm prepared for that. What I'm saying is, I don't need you anymore." What wife would want to stay with a grown man who couldn't take care of himself? I had reached my breaking point with my husband. His verbal abuse was intolerable, something that perhaps could have been resolved through discussion. However, he had crossed another line by leaving me with a high fever to go out for drinks. As his wife lay in the hospital, he transformed our home into a den of filth, failing miserably at the responsibilities of both a husband and a father. "And what were you really doing, suddenly going out for drinks?" I demanded, fixing him with a stern glare. My husband visibly flinched, a comical reaction considering the seriousness of the situation. "That's none of your business," he retorted defensively. "No, it is my business. I'm your mother. I have every right to know. Tell me the truth," Mary asserted firmly, causing my husband to tremble with panic. "If you won't confess, should I present the undeniable evidence?" "Evidence? What do you mean?" His complexion paled as realization dawned on him. "Yes, confess now. You're only making it worse for yourself." Under Mary's unwavering interrogation, he finally hung his head in shame and admitted, "I'm sorry." In essence, he had been having an affair with a coworker since I became pregnant and managing household chores, and his responsibilities became too much for him to handle. "What's her name? Which department? How often did you meet each week?" Mary and I bombarded my husband with questions, capturing the entire confrontation on my mobile phone. "All right, confession evidence collected. Thanks for speaking up so honestly," I said with a smile as I stopped the recording. My husband's expression hardened once more. "You tricked me." "Yes, who would have thought you were actually cheating? Thanks to you. We didn't have to hire a detective." "Much appreciated," I replied coolly. "You deceived me," my husband spat out in frustration, trying to shift the blame onto me for his infidelity. His logic was baffling. "You were just pretending to be sick to get my sympathy, weren't you?" he accused. "It's mutual, not even close," I retorted, feeling increasingly despondent as he refused to acknowledge his own faults. Mary let out a deep sigh and muttered, "Selfish, tyrannical, always making excuses. You're just like your father, whom I divorced, you know that?" Dad." My husband was taken aback by Mary's unexpected revelation. "That's true," he admitted quietly, his resentment towards his father resurfacing. "His father was infamous for causing trouble when drunk. But my husband never imagined he'd be compared to him. I never got drunk and caused a scene, he protested. But Mary was referring to something deeper. Your father also abandoned me during my pregnancy to go drinking, remember? Sons often mirror their fathers. I should have divorced him before you were old enough to remember. Mary explained, her tone tinged with both disdain and sorrow. My husband was left speechless, frozen in shock. A father who negatively influences his children is better off gone, don't you think, Michelle? Mary turned to me for agreement. Yes, it's unnecessary. In fact, it should be avoided, I concurred. With Mary's valid reasoning for divorce, my husband, still speechless, was handed the divorce papers by me. However, he clung to us desperately. Let's reconsider this. We're going to have a child. Can't we calm down and talk? His pleading tone resembled that of a child begging his mother. What are you saying? That ship has sailed long ago, I replied firmly. So what am I supposed to do now? He asked, covering his face in distress, but still showing some resistance. Mary delivered the final ultimatum. Enough. If you persist in clinging to Michelle, I'll sever our mother-son relationship. What will you choose? Why won't you take my side, Mom? He appeared defeated, while Mary stood resolute by my side until the end. Eventually, I filed for divorce in my 7th month of pregnancy. I hadn't anticipated our relationship deteriorating with the impending arrival of our child, but perhaps it was inevitable. Following the divorce, I moved back to my parents' home and gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My parents were taken aback, having been unaware until my return with a visible pregnancy. The lawyer recommended by my father handled the divorce proceedings, ensuring compensation for the mental and financial distress I endured. Additionally, I made sure the other woman contributed her share post-divorce. Despite my ex-husband's repeated visits to my parents' house, pleading to see the child, I responded with biting sarcasm. When will you fulfill your child support obligations? To which he nonsensically replied, we don't need that. We're family, we belong together. What nonsense. Just fulfill your basic duty as a father. Even if you were a failure as a husband, you still have responsibilities as a parent, or are you even worse than zero in everything? I watched as my husband left, his expression resembling that of someone struck on the head, visibly dejected. His father's influence must have left a lasting mark on him. Word began to circulate that he had resigned from his job. He vented to his colleagues about our divorce, adamantly asserting his innocence, but it backfired spectacularly. Whether he truly believed he was blameless or not, his recounting of the verbal and physical abuse he inflicted on me only fueled disdain from his coworkers. Simultaneously, rumors of his affair with a female coworker spread like wildfire. His reprehensible behavior garnered no sympathy, resulting in his ostracization at work and eventual resignation. Despite his delusions of reconciliation, I harbored no such intentions. Michelle, are you planning to return to work soon? How's your health? A concerned acquaintance inquired. Yes, I'm much better now. I need to work for the sake of my little one. I replied resolutely, that's what being a dependable mom entails. Unbeknownst to my ex-husband, I occasionally meet with Mary and my child. Initially hesitant, Mary insisted that we were strangers after the divorce, but upon hearing my heartfelt gratitude, she gladly held my son. Please guide me as a fellow single mother, I implored. Leave it to me. Let's support each other like comrades or detectives who vanquished a villain, she responded with a warm smile. Somehow, Mary and I have forged a closer bond than ever before. It's not a bad relationship at all, but at times, I can't help but worry. You're just like your father, Mary's words echo in my mind. Will my child follow in his father's footsteps one day? Is blood truly thicker than water? It's futile to dwell on such thoughts now. It's a concern for the distant future. However, I am resolved to instill in him the values of righteousness, kindness, and empathy. My son is simply my son, nothing more, nothing less. As a mother, my sole purpose is to dedicate my life to nurturing him. As the winter sun gently pierces the cold sky, It feels as though nature itself is cheering me on.